Hello again, and thanks for tuning in. We're going to discuss the topic of conscription again today. I have previously done videos on Lord Dannatt and Sir Richard Sheriff talking about conscription, and we've got a gentleman today by the name of NIcholas Drummond, who we'll cover in a minute. The topic of conscription seems to be rearing its head all the time, so we're just going to do a little tour of the media and see what the temperature is at the moment. So we're going to start off with NIcholas Drummond, and then we're going to move on to a couple of other comments and see how we're feeling about this. So here is Mr. Drummond.
We've had a real generational problem in that the army no longer attracts the people it needs, because it's not seen as being a priority, it's not seen as being something that is supported nationally. And the only reason it's really surviving at the moment is because it's able to recruit generationally. That is, the children of people who have previously served are joining, which is a great thing. So in order to change the whole recruitment dynamic, we're going to need advertising, of course, but also I think we're going to need to offer something in return for service. So we may need to have some kind of national service or conscription, and in return for that, perhaps your university fees are paid, or some other benefit in kind is offered. So we've got a real job to do.
You talk about conscription for all?
For all three services, you mean?
No, sorry, yeah. But for all young people. So a bit, say, like in Israel, where you go to the army or to the armed forces for a certain period of time, for every young person.
Well, that could be an option, definitely. Some people will not want to do it at all and resist it at all costs. And others will be attracted to it. So it depends what the benefit in kind is that makes people want to do it. However, I think if we had a really difficult situation, things got worse than they are now, if that's possible, then people might decide, actually, I feel a duty to join up and do this.
Do you think that with the precarious situation we're in now, Europe has the ability to step up and plug the gap that could potentially be left by the US?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you have to remember that Europe's combined GDP is more or less the same as China's. It's a little bit more, 20 trillion euros. So we've definitely got the resources and we've got the skills base here to do that. And I think what we can do, which in a way we can do better than America, is that we can have multiple factories producing the same type of equipment, which will give us an extra element of resilience in terms of building stuff. I think what scares me is that we need to do this now, and that the political people in charge of this across Europe do not understand the long lead times associated not only with training people, but actually producing military hardware.
NIcholas Drummond there. So, Mr. Drummond here, he is a strategic consultant based in the UK. He started his professional career in the British Army, and I believe he served as an infantry platoon commander in the Welsh Guards during the 1980s, and I believe he had 7 years of military service before he moved on to other things related to marketing. He's quite passionate about all things military, and I believe he, at the moment, he's specialising in helping defence industry clients kind of assess land vehicles and things of that nature, armoured vehicles, and he's involved in various things to do with land power. So again, I'm an ex-military man, knows what he's talking about, and he spent a lot of time talking about the military. So certainly when he talks about things, we'll have to take the man at his word. Now, Mr. Drummond's first point about generational recruitment. I do believe that he's 100% spot on with that, and I am reminded of the old adage of hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. And for me, we're in the last section of that at the moment, which is weak men create hard times. I think it's not really a trendy thing to be in the military anymore. Possibly in the 20th century there were times, particularly in between the end of World War II and the 80s and 90s, where the military was seen as a good choice for a lot of young people to take up. But I'm in full agreement with Mr. Drummond here. I don't believe it's seen as a cool thing to do. When I was younger, people used to say, join the army, see the world. And that was a bit of an attraction for some people, from they'd be in their town and then the next thing they'd be, in Belize or whatever. And I'm sure that was attractive to young men and women back in the day. But it seems like in the modern day, no longer. Also, we've got a difference in communities, a difference in trust. We live in a low trust society, and a lot of people are very, very down on the country in which they live in. And so, there's a lot of talk about Britain being a colonial power, an ex-colonial slave traders, and all of this type of rubbish that gets thrown around. And as a result, a lot of people, I believe half of young people, are going into some form of secondary education, and their minds are kind of, I believe, polluted to a certain extent in that framework, to kind of think that we should be berating ourselves and going through this self-flagellation process continually, where we continually whine about how nasty we've been in the past. And as a result of this, the army in the modern day has taken on a different sheen. And so I completely agree with Mr. Drummond on the generational aspect of what he was talking about there. Now, just picking up on the second point that he made with regard to advertising, I don't really feel like it's an advertising problem, although that could be looked at. I think it's the public perception mainly of the army that is the issue with recruitment. And he did mention there, of course, the point that if you have children of people that have been in the military, then they are certainly way more the type of person that's willing to join the military and complete service for their country, which is, it's pretty obvious that people look to their parents as role models. And if your parents have been in the military, then it's quite likely that, it would certainly be the type of career path that you would certainly be more open to. Now, he did mention after that, Mr. Drummond, about benefits in kind and financial incentives, and that was mixed up with a question that the lady asked him about mandatory conscription. Now, there are some models you can look at around the world, particularly what's often used is the Israeli model of that, where all young people are basically told to do it, and that's part of their culture. I think what Mr. Drummond does mention here is that he believes that just wouldn't work here, and I'm in full agreement with Mr. Drummond on that. I think the public outcry would be such that it would never actually get off the ground, not certainly with our current crop of MPs, and certainly the public perception of the military at the moment. I can't really see a way that would get off the ground. But I don't think you would have to go as far as mandatory conscription. I think if you were to offer a viable path to a lot of young people, given that after the age of 16 to 19, young people have to now do something, whether that could be going into college or whatever it is, and a lot of young people just aren't suited to that. And so that age range from 16 to 19 is a really good age range for young people if they wanted to choose to go into something like the military. And, it could be that, for those people that choose it, and I would imagine there would be a lot of young people would choose that, because a lot of young people don't want to go into any form of education, and the military could be seen as a viable option for a lot of people. I believe you could pay these people to go and do it, as Mr. Drummond said, some type of benefit in kind. I wouldn't say it's a benefit in kind, or we'll offer you free university fees or anything like that. I just think you just pay people to go into the military at 16 and 19, and I think you would have a huge amount of people into that resource pool, and I think that would sort out any issues that we had. And the final point I'll make on that little segment there was when the lady mentioned to Mr. Drummond, do you think that, given the precarious situation that we are in now, do you think that Europe would be able to plug the gap that America is leaving if, say, America was to completely pull out, as it looks like they're going to do now? And I think this belies our media and the disconnect that the media has with our reality. The UK is not in a precarious situation. Russia is not going to roll its tanks through Europe into Poland, etc., etc. This isn't the 1930s. This isn't, we're not talking about Hitler here. Whilst Vladimir Putin is an aggressive warmonger who should never have invaded Ukraine, without any doubt it was completely unacceptable for him to do that. Do I believe that he wants to keep the tanks rolling through? No, I don't believe we're in a precarious situation at all. And further to that, even asking the question, do I believe that Europe could step up and fill the role of America? The answer to that question is no. Do I feel in the future that Europe could get up to, be fighting fit if it was to invest a ton of money in the military and bring it back to normal functioning level? Then yes, but right at this moment, no. We need America, mainly because they spend on defence, and Europe has really neglected its military for a number of decades, and it's actually put itself into a position where we are dependent upon America. I'm not too happy about that point. I don't think we should be dependent on America, and my personal view is that we would or should increase our defence spending to a better level. But as for are we able to do it now, that's a definite no. Now the final points that Mr. Drummond makes is about duty, and about if the time arose where people had to do it, then he believes that they would do it, and I agree with that. If it was the case that the enemy was on our doorstep, then I would be lining up along with everybody else, I'm sure. And so that's quite an obvious point. But again, the media here and this lady wants to kind of portray the situation as different than it actually is. We're not in a precarious situation at all. We're talking about a conflict that's on the other side of the European continent. And I believe that conflict is ultimately going to come to an end soon. These comments by the lady are so far off the mark as to be silly, in my opinion. Okay, so we're going to round off this video with a short clip from GB News of a gentleman called Alex Cairns. Now, he's the CEO of something called Youth Vote UK. So he's an intelligent chap, and he's going to give you his view on how young people feel, or what he thinks young people feel about conscription and mandatory conscription.
And it is hypothetical, but let's say the war gets worse between Ukraine and Russia, and actually military troops go on the ground. I know we debate if that's going to happen, but let's say hypothetically it does. You would literally be saying to people, it's not your choice, you have to go and fight in the war.
So what's your point?
But my point is, that's ridiculous. We can't get to a situation where young people are forced to do it just because other countries have decided that they want to.
What do you think happened in the First World War and the Second World War? How do you think people went to fight? They were conscripted.
Yeah. I don't agree with it.
But I'm just saying that's how it works.
Well, that's how it worked then. It doesn't mean it has to work now.
Well, I suspect it would have to, because people like you would say, oh no, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do this, don't do that. So in the end, we would need people to fight who are of fit fighting age, which would be somebody like you.
I wouldn't want to do it.
Away.
I wouldn't want to do it, and I don't think a lot of people my age would want to do it, right? It's a big thing to basically ask people to go into war. And look, the military should always be a voluntary thing. We should be asking people, do you want to serve your country? I reckon if push comes to shove and they put the question out, probably lots of young people would come forward. But it can't be mandatory, because you're forcing some people. Because it's just not fair, you know?
Well, no, war isn't fair.
Too true. War is definitely not fair. So the views of Mr. Cairns there, and I think he echoes what a lot of young people think, how a lot of young people feel at the moment. War, for people who live in Europe, is something, it's a theoretical exercise. Our lives have become not softened. Softened wouldn't be the right way to put it. Our lives have become easy and good to a large extent, and most of our problems in the modern day are of our own making. Certainly, you look around the world, particularly today, and you look at places like Syria, where people are being massacred, and you've got kind of dead bodies in the street, etc. We've never experienced anything like that, in Europe for quite some time, and as a result, a lot of young people are completely disconnected from how people may have felt during, times like the Second World War and stuff like that. So I think what that goes to show is exactly how most young people do feel about war, about the army, and this is really the struggle that the army faces in terms of recruitment. If they wanted to increase their numbers, that is, the amount of people that would want to fight for their country is diminished in the modern day, and I just think this is a reflection of that. So, in conclusion, conscription. I don't think today or right now conscription is necessary for the Ukraine war. If it was ever needed in the future, then that would be a different matter, but we're not anywhere near that, and it's debatable whether we'll ever be anywhere near that, considering the nature of warfare is changing all the time, particularly with drones, etc. Now, in terms of conscription, the arguments for and against, I think one of the main arguments for conscription would be obviously national security. If we did need a bigger army to defend ourselves, then, national conscription would work in those terms. Would it lead to more national unity? Probably. Would it teach young people some discipline, some responsibility, resilience? A lot of those things that are lacking in modern society. Yes. Would conscription, fill those recruitment gaps that the British Army is struggling to recruit? Yes. What about the economic and social benefits? This leads to a much stronger sense of patriotism and national duty. But is all of that enough to justify forced military service? And the answer to that is, as Mr. Drummond said, as was echoed by the gentleman on GB News here, it's just not a thing that would pass muster. It's not a thing that would ever be accepted unless the threat was literally on our doorstep. I think, a lot of the people that argue against conscription would use things like, freedom, choice, human rights, the fact that, a professional army is better filled with willing recruits, because unwilling recruits are just going to be a liability in combat. And, the public backlash towards mandatory conscription would be massive. And of course, you've got the economic costs of that. Equipping thousands upon thousands of people is expensive, and would taxpayers be willing to fit the bill? So, just to round this off here, Mandatory conscription, my belief is that it's never ever going to be accepted by the populace in the modern day, unless we're talking about armies, amassing on the shores of France, ready to come over. Then at that stage, all bets are off. Anyway, I believe the army in the modern day should be looking to recruit people in the ages of 16 to 19. I think there needs to be a large government programme which would say to people, look, instead of going to university, instead of going to college, perhaps you might want to do this. You're going to receive a salary, you're going to get some money, and you're going to get some training, which you'll be to take forward into the civilian world, some type of vocational training perhaps at the same time. That would certainly work for those people who would feel that the military is a better option for them. But, in terms of all of those arguments, I believe Mr. Drummond was 100% correct when he said that, it just wouldn't work and there would be too many people who wouldn't want to do it. Thanks very much for your time now, I appreciate it.